Thank you, John Fallon, Gerald, Eduardo, and Sterling. I must say, listening to you three gives me a certain renewed confidence about our future. So next, we're going to examine the different avenues to workforce readiness in Texas, and we're delighted to be joined by several people who have a real-world perspective on this. Jeffrey Parks is Dean of Business and Technology at San Jacinto College. Dean Parks oversees 22 occupational and technical programs at the Houston-based community college. Juan Sanchez Muñoz is Senior Vice President and Vice Provost at Texas Tech. Amanda Chiampi is Director of Sustainability at AT&T, and Bryan Miller is Principal of Eastside Memorial High School in East Austin. The Atlantic's Ron Brownstein is back to lead the conversation. Ron?
Back for more. Thank you, Margaret. So the core issue we're really talking about here today is the youth population, the student body, and the future workforce are all changing. They're changing nationally, and Texas is kind of a fast forward of what is happening in the country, where you're already at a clear majority of the under 18 population, a clear majority of the K-12 student body, and an increasing share of your future post-secondary students and workforce are kids of color. Principal Miller, you are on the front lines of this transition. Eastside High School has been through a marathon of struggles with the accountability systems. Today it is 80% Hispanic, 16% African American, 85% free lunch, which means that students are at 130% of the poverty level or below, another 5% reduced price lunch, so 90% in all qualify for free or reduced price lunch. What are the keys to equipping more students emerging from that background to succeed?
What we've worked on, what we've worked on is a lot of the stuff that they talked about here on the stage. Alamo Academies and Access, working with business and industry. We actually were awarded the inaugural Rather Prize last night at South by Southwest EDU. And what that idea is to create access to college classrooms, similar to what was set up here today. Access to industry where kids not only can go and see for a day, or they go see a college visit, they can go see a classroom, they can go sit in a classroom, they're mentored by a college kid. That kind of access and exposure is what's going to lead our kids to feel comfortable being successful post-graduation high school.
Is your goal to put more kids on a post-secondary 2-year track or a 4-year track or both? How do you kind of think about it in those terms?
It's up to the kid. Mm-hmm. So our population, we focus more on what kids want to do, not what kids want to be. So there was discussion about wanting to be a physical therapist from Eduardo. He went to a clinical experience and saw that, hey, this is what I want to do, not necessarily what I want to be. And so we leave it up to the kid. We provide access, we provide opportunities, and hopefully they find out what they want to do through those exposures.
All right, let me come back to that in a minute. Jeffrey, Emily, my colleague who just was here at the previous panel, spent some time at San Jacinto College last year at a welding class that finished at 2 a.m.
Correct.
Right, so it was kind of the graveyard shift of welding classes. Can you explain to us how it came to be that there was a class going on at that hour?
It's mostly because of need. We were working with our industry partners, and as we started to work with our industry partners, our welding classes fill up extremely quickly. We have a little over 1,000 students in both of our welding programs on our North Campus and Central Campus. And so with all of those students trying to get into our programs, they literally fill up within days and from the initial opening. And so we started to think, well, what else can we do? How can we help meet those needs of the employers? And so we decided, hey, let's look at a graveyard shift. And so we looked at that, and we started offering sections at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and they started to fill.
And are these? I believe you have some photos, by the way, which we can,
yes,
which
we do have some photos
in one second. Are these typically students who are at the school? Are they most often working as well?
Yes, almost all of our students are working. 70% of our population is a part-time student because of the fact that they have to work to go to school. So we have classes offered at many different times. Senator Cornyn came and visited us a year and a half ago, and when he came, he met with some students that were in our instrumentation program and our process technology program. One student started out in cosmetology. She got her degree in cosmetology. She decided that she wanted to have a better career because of the fact that she she thought that there was better opportunities in the petrochem industry. She went into our process technology program, and she graduated from our process technology program. And as she was finishing up, she found out that instrumentation is another avenue. And so then she thought, I would like to do that because of the fact that she is a single mom, she has kids. And with process technology, there's a lot of rotating shifts that happen with process technology. Instrumentation doesn't work that way. And so she said, the senator asked her what she made last year, and she said, I made $132,000 with a 2-year degree. And he said, so you gave that up to go into instrumentation? She said, no, I'm not stupid. I did these classes at night because San Jacinto College has night classes for me. So she went and she got her degree in instrumentation and moved and changed her career
Do we
again.
have those photos that we can see? Let's see a couple of the looks inside the classroom. Tell us what we're looking at.
What this is our pilot plant. And our pilot plant is an actually fully operational plant that a student will work on both instrumentation and non-destructive testing and process technology. So this is about a 800 square foot plant. We just passed a bond, and we're planning to build a pilot plant that's about right at 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. So we're, everything is bigger in Texas, so we're trying to build a more realistic one. And the reason we're doing that is because when industry came and they looked at our facilities, they said, you've got wonderful facilities. We'd like to have it more realistic, more relevant, and so we want to see it larger and bigger. And so the second picture that we were looking at was a student working on a DCS system for instrumentation. And so that's what that green liquid was. It's in a vial, and what's happening is a student will actually be going through some processes, and that level will go up or down based on what they're actually doing for the DCS system. The last picture should have been our welding program. I think those were the pictures of the students that are in the 10 p.m. class. So they're welding away. It's just been a tremendous opportunity for our students. And because where we're located, we're right on the ship channel. We have a lot of students that might be working on the ship channel, and they're trying to get into a different career because they want to have different opportunities. And so that 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift has been a tremendous benefit.
So, Mr. Muñoz, let me ask you, we talked about before, in the state of Texas, Latinos alone are already a majority of the K-12 public school system, which means that they are an increasing share of the future higher ed system, post-secondary system as well. One sign of progress nationally, I don't know the numbers in Texas, but nationally, Latino kids and African American kids who graduate from high school are now almost exactly as likely as white kids to go directly on to college, but there is still a big gap in completion.
Right.
They're starting, but they're not completing at the same rates. What is your experience with completion, and what are some of the strategies you have seen to be the most effective in closing that completion gap?
Right. Well, first of all, I'd like to just begin by saying that I think we should have a tremendous sense of optimism given the caliber of students we just heard from. So that's an important foundation, and even the young man from Brownsville and the kinds of things that he's prepared to do in order to pursue his education into 4-year school and medical school and potentially as a physical therapist. When you look at the major school districts in the state, they're already majority minority, increasingly Hispanic. There's no doubt that these students will matriculate into higher education. Do they have the academic skills from post-secondary education? Do they have the intellectual wherewithal? Do they have the enthusiasm? You heard that they do. Do they have the technical skills, the intellectual curiosity? Do they have the discipline? And then do they have the support structures? There are many schools that often will refer to the number of minorities, particularly Hispanics. You may be a Hispanic serving institution, you may be well beyond 25%, but what is your completion rate? So we've got to think very differently. We've got to think very differently about what we consider success. Success should be not simply numerical representation, but success should be persistence, articulation, and completion. Are you finishing these students? We've got to think much more innovatively, much more dynamically about this metric of success. And we've got to inculcate in students not just technical sensibilities, but when you think about the industries of the future, once upon a time you would have never had a course late into the morning. You have to innovate. You think about the kinds of industries and jobs, the job changes in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. These students that will have many jobs, do they have a sense of interdisciplinary thinking? Do they have a sense of diversity and the value of being able to work with people that are from different towns, different states, and different countries? Do they have a sense of mobility, a sense of intellectual flexibility? And so all of these things, I think that, in my opinion, in my experience, a high school teacher, community college instructor, full professor, and administrator now, we've got to think differently about how to finance the students at critical times. Whether the question of free education is financially viable is, as the young man said, complicated. But there are critical junctures that families that are first generation, low income, moderate income, challenged income, critical junctions, particularly for Latinos, particularly for Chicano families, where it could be a few hundred, it could be a few thousand, that is enough at that critical juncture in their education to complete them. And this should be the better indicator of academic success. Completion to graduation, ideally matriculation to some kind of graduate program, professional school, etc.
Where do you rank financial pressures on the list of factors that inhibit completion?
Very high.
Very
high across the board. In West Texas, we have families, we have majority kids that are coming from small towns. I met this one kid, this one young lady, she was graduating class of 15. They're very economically challenged and they have tremendous drive and discipline. In West Texas, we talk about grit and character. And they have those qualities. And let me tell you, sometimes tenacity is a little bit more determinant of success than apparent talent. Tenacity. And so they're very challenged economically. This is going to become more and more an issue as you have these majorities kids from moderate income, limited income, challenged incomes matriculating into higher education. How do you help finance their success?
Beyond the finances, let me ask you real quick, academically, you know, I've seen, I was recently in Chicago where they've been trying to reform the community colleges, which were looking at a completion rate under 10%, just historic, you know, failure, really, kind of system-wide failure. And one of the things they've tried to do is narrow the pathways, basically create a more structured environment in the post-secondary environment, which is somewhat even reminiscent of high school in the sense of you don't have infinite choice. You know, kind of we're going to steer you toward taking this, 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 and this, and then you know what, you're going to have a certificate in 2 or 3 years. What are you doing on the academic side to help your large population?
Well, we obviously higher ed needs to work even more aggressively and more dynamically in a vertical way with K-12. We have to understand, they have to be familiar with the expectations that we'll impose on students and vice versa. We've got to be much more sensitive to providing instruction early. You heard the young lady talk about dual language, concurrent enrollment, IB programs. Here's the thing. We had to evolve from the one-room classroom. We had to evolve when we introduced significant technology. We have to evolve in our thinking about how to help this new generation, this inevitable generation of students succeed with the same urgency and the same rigor that we did past generations. These students, you heard them, want everything. They want they have all of the ambition and talent. We need to increase rigor and increase expectations and not fall victims to there are probably a lot of people in this room that that are from moderate backgrounds, modest background, immigrant parent, non-educated background, and did very well. So we need to think differently about the importance of rigor and high expectations, even among those. Being poor doesn't mean I'm impoverished in my ambition or ability.
Yeah, I mean,
Ron, if I could add to that. One of the things that at the community college level that we've been working on is programs of study. Programs of study in the state of Texas has been around for quite a while, but clearly defined pathways and programs of study. We have data to show that the students are actually completing quicker and completing on time and completing those programs of study. So by clearly defining and getting that expectation of if you start here and end here, they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train coming from the other direction.
Right.
And so that's a good thing for the students
let me
to
bring
help
in a
them
minute,
get into the workforce.
You're the kind of the ultimate consumer here in some ways. Of the, you know, you are hiring the products of the education. Talk a little bit about the kind of workers you want to hire in Texas and whether you can find them in Texas.
Well, last year we hired about 25,000 employees. So we're based here in Texas, but we're a worldwide company. And about 72% of those were STEM related. So we have, there's an urgency, it's a workforce, it's a business issue for us to be able to hire and find these employees. And we're of course looking for a diverse workforce And once we have that diverse workforce, we invest a lot of resources in retaining them as well.
When you say 25,000, is that in Texas or is that
No,
worldwide?
that's company-wide.
No, so when you think about your situation, we were talking about this with the mayor before, and I think it would be true for, just as it is true for the city of Austin, it would be true for AT&T. You can probably attract people from anywhere. You know, you probably can attract STEM graduates from, who went to school in Utah or Illinois or Massachusetts. Is there an inherent need or value to ultimately hire kids who grew up in Texas itself or from the local communities where you're working? Do you see any value in that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'd say because we're headquartered in Texas, we always have been. Once we were in San Antonio, now we're up in Dallas. We just have strong investment and commitment to the communities in which we operate. So we, of course, love to hire from our local communities.
And can you find the people you need at this point? How would you sort of rate that in Texas?
I'd say we can't, and that's one of the reasons
You
that
can't.
we recently partnered with Udacity. So we launched a series of what's called a Nano Degrees, which are these topic-specific degrees, online certificates. It's a MOOC, a massive online open course. And we consider those certificate for an entry-level job at AT&T.
Mm-hmm. Because you mentioned before, the other part of it is that this, as I said, Texas has elements of America on fast forward, where the diversity of the student body is just so enormous at this point. A majority, Latinos alone are now a majority. Not only kids of color, but Latinos alone are a majority. What does that mean for an employer? I mean, what are the challenges it creates recruiting, creating a work environment that is congenial, hospitable to a more diverse workforce?
I'd say that we have a mindset of diversity and inclusion. So and that happens at the board level. We have a chief diversity officer. It's ingrained throughout our company. We have things like employee resource groups, which are targeted and inclusive of everyone, but they will work with, say, an African American population to make sure that everyone feels at home and welcome and that they have a part within the company.
So, thank you. Principal Miller, the school, Eastside Memorial, has had a long odyssey through the accountability system in Texas. It's been closed, retooled, renamed 3 times, I believe, in the last decade. There's a big debate at the national level that we went through about the accountability system. On the one hand, you had people arguing that it's too prescriptive, it's too narrow in the sense of not leaving enough option at the local level. On the other hand, you have people arguing that without rigorous accountability, school districts will kind of sweep under the rug the disparities between more affluent students and lower income students. You guys have been through this at a very personal level. What is your take on where accountability can be part of the solution and where is it part of the problem?
I'll start with the problem first. So some of our success, I think I can attribute to consistency. So prior to me, and the class of 2012 at Eastside had 5 principals. I was the 5th one.
Oh.
And so that kind of inconsistency in programming and routines and structures and supports for kids leads to a path where nobody really has any accountability for any of it. It's everybody just kind of floating along, hoping that they keep their job or hoping that they'll have tomorrow. So I think some consistency in the administration, in the teachers, and the faculty, and the programming can lead to success. The accountability system is getting better. I would say it's getting better. House Bill 5 introduced some opportunities for kids to be out and about and doing some internships and things like that, and still getting credit. And also they reduced the number of tests. The tests are more or less, we went from 15 to 5, but I still don't think we're quite there. Part of the new law that's really frustrating, and we have to play these numbers, is that our special education students have to compete at the same level as our general education students, and we are being held accountable for their ability to be college ready. And so for a special education student to take an on-grade level test and then fail before they can be out of the accountability system is not helping that kid's prospectus, that kid's future, that kid's ability to be positive and think well for themselves. So there are still problems, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
I want to ask a question for our higher education folks. We've been talking a lot about young people, but in the Texas metros, and like in most metros, we are looking at big gaps in the educational attainment level of the adult population along racial lines. In Houston, almost 2/3 of working age whites hold at least a 2-year degree, compared to less than 1/4 for African American and Hispanic workers. In Dallas, it's about 2/3 versus about 1/5. In Austin, as we said, about 2/3 of white adults, working age adults, hold at least a 2-year degree, compared to about 1/3 for African American Hispanics. For those adults, can we realistically make a dent in this skills gap, or does the focus mostly have to be about closing the differences for the next generation? Can you reach the existing adult population?
I would say yes. One of the things that is such a need right now is there's a tremendous need in the workforce. The average age of workers in many of the industries is between 52 to 55 years old. So no matter what, they're looking for whoever can fill those positions. And so we're going to continue to work with the population that we have. At a community college, we accept 100% of the students. We don't differentiate. So whoever comes into our classrooms, we really strive hard to educate them and get them into the workforce as quickly as possible. Some of our programs, students can go to work in the industry after they have a basic certificate. And some of them, the industry requires an associate degree. It just depends on the industry. So our industry partners tell us what they want to have and what's necessary. And so then we're trying to meet that need. Over 50% of our population is in the minority area. So one of the key things to also help in that transition is finding qualified faculty and finding qualified faculty that people can relate to. If it's male, female, Hispanic, African American, whoever it may be, we're working hard to get those people into our faculty so that students can see that it is a possibility. We have female welder faculty. And yeah, you just raised your eyebrows there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking when I was in Chicago at a welding class, it wasn't quite
Yes.
the vibe.
And so that's when you talk about that, that's what students have to see in order to be able to say, I can do that. She's doing it and she's teaching now, or whatever it may be. So that's a common thing that we work on.
Mr. Muñoz, what can be done with the adult skill gaps?
Well, I think the answer is yes. And you have to be very purposeful about advancing the interest of both of those populations. There are many people that realize late in their careers that a degree, a continuation of a 2-year degree to a 4-year degree is beneficial. You also have to keep in mind that the career or the job that they're in today may not be the job that they're in 15 years or 20 years. Yeah. And people's earning trajectory and work life is every year extending. So they may not be in the same job 20 years from now that they are today. So they might find some benefit of taking that certificate in welding. And for example, there's a degree in Texas called the BAS, the Bachelor's of Applied Arts and Science, where you can take this credit and invert it into a baccalaureate degree that might give that woman welder a chance to be a supervisor and a vice president at that company, that without the degree, they might be precluded from that opportunity. And it's important that, it's just not the technical content. It's the intellectual curiosity, it's the problem solving, it's the critical thinking that come from the degree, it's the interaction with others. And so there are many other things that happen in terms of one's development in the classroom, but also what we refer to as co-curricularly outside of the classroom.
So Amanda, let me ask you, how much responsibility can employers take for increasing the skills of the adult population? Does someone have to be fully formed when you take them in, or how much role can employers play more broadly in increasing the skills of their adult workforce?
I'd say I don't think we're ever fully formed, right? We can always expand our potential and continue to develop. And I'd say that's a mindset of AT&T as well. So we have things like tuition stipend. We have an internal organization called T University, which is all about continued development. And these are free classes that are available to our employees. Anything from problem solving and public speaking all the way up to big data and the more technical sciences. So we are taking responsibility for the skills that we think that we're going to need as a business and making sure that that workforce is going to be there for us.
So I'm going to bring in the audience in a moment. I want to ask you a broader question, which we were talking about a little bit backstage. Steve Murdoch, former U.S. Census, head of the U.S. Census under President Bush, former Texas State demographer, now at Rice University, sociologist at Rice. He's written a book. He notes that Anglos today are almost half of the Texas workforce. Hispanics are about 1/3. African Americans about 11%, others around 5%. They project with his team that by 2050, Hispanics will outnumber non-Hispanic white workers by almost 2-to-1 under the most conservative scenario and almost 3-to-1 under the more expansive scenario. And by that point, the median income of Texas workers as a whole will shrink because so many Hispanics will be stuck in low-wage jobs along current trajectory. He says, in the absence of change, the Texas labor force as a whole will be less well-educated, work in lower status occupations, and have lower incomes in 2050 than 2010. In fact, they project that in 2050, the share of working-age Texans with a college degree under current terms, under current trajectories, 4-year degree or more, will be lower in 2050 than it is today, which seems a pretty ominous prospect in an information age. So I'm just wondering, I want to go around the table, maybe Jeffrey, start with you and then come down.
Okay.
Do you think that, it's kind of the urgency question we were asking before, do you think the public and private decision makers in the state are sufficiently focused on the magnitude of the change that it is living through and the trend lines it may be looking at if they can't if they can't narrow some of these gaps?
I would say yes. As far as industry, our partners are very closely working with us. We just passed a $425 million bond at San Jacinto College. Part of that bond is to build new facilities for our petrochem industry. It's a 133,000 square foot facility. Now, some colleges, they may look at it as, well, this is what we plan to do. What we've done is our chancellor, Brenda Hellier, has brought in an industry advisory committee. These are local plant managers. We have 140 plants in our backyard, literally. And so we brought those plant managers in. We've talked with those plant managers. We've had them at the table. We have someone that is on our advisory panel that actually met with our builders just this last week to look at what's going to go into that building. They've been involved in the process since the very beginning on that whole building project. Having that and having that support from business and industry is extremely important, and because they understand what is necessary to come into the workforce.
Mr. How do you assess the awareness, urgency?
I'd say there's no doubt that the leadership, both legislatively as well as in higher education, is acutely aware of what's going to happen and very much committed to making sure that that next generation is successful. There's no doubt in my mind.
Amanda?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we're very aware of the urgency, and that's why we've committed now $350 million to high school graduation and higher ed achievement. So we're also building that pipeline of workers, and we're investing in groups like Girls Who Code and Black Girls Code so that we have a good workforce of technical workers coming forward, in addition to investing right now with our current workforce and making sure they can be reskilled and upskilled.
Principal?
I would say from my seat, I feel like I'm still having to push my kids and my opportunities out into industry and higher ed. We struggle to get people to, and we're not asking for money, we're asking for time and opportunity for kids. So we want kids to be able to go sit in a class, at a welding class at 10 a.m. or 1 or 2 p.m., either one. We want
Give me a call.
Go shadow at AT&T. We want them to be able to go sit in a 4-year college class and be able to experience, to say what Ms. Muñoz says, that I see myself sitting in that seat. I look like some of the people that are sitting in these seats. I can do that. And so we are still, I feel like at least me and personally, are still working to push our kids and get those opportunities out in their junior and senior year for that.
Let's get 1 or 2 questions from the audience. We have one right here in the front, semi-front. There we go. Blindsided you there, yeah.
Keith Henry, City of Austin, Health and Human Services Department. My question is, and I'm going to preface it by saying it's more of a hypothetical. It may not be relative to skills training. It is about pay equity. So even if the gap between minority majority populace within the United States is bridged, how, let's take for example the young man from Tomball, I'm from the Houston area as well, the young man from Tomball and the young man from Brownsville, they both enter the workforce together with the requisite qualifications, yet that young man from Tomball, even the data suggests that he will likely make more money throughout his tenure as opposed to the young man from Brownsville. Does any of your organizations, what are your sentiments about pay as it relates to pay equity or that type of
Pay equity for workers with similar educational credentials but across racial lines.
Yes.
Any thoughts?
the employer.
So as you might imagine, AT&T has a very robust HR and salary system, and ethnicity and that type of background isn't part of that, and we make sure that we're paying not only at an above market rate, but that employees who are doing comparable work at a comparable level are compensated the same.
Mr. Muñoz, you track the experience of your graduates, whether there is in fact a pay gap for graduates?
I tell you, I think the data might be a bit vague on whether or not there's an income disparity. Generally, people that have similar degrees and similar professions make a comparable income, and I think most people wouldn't tolerate anything but sort of equitable pay.
Maybe one more question to wrap us up. If we have, well, you've asked one already, so if we have someone else who hasn't, or else, you can go. No, we have someone over there, yeah.
Hello. I want to address the opportunities for older workers to improve themselves. I come from a college in the state of New York where we used the model of credit by evaluation. In other words, giving credit for life work, life experience. And I was wondering whether that's available in the state of Texas, and that's probably Dr. Muñoz would be able to, on a four-year college for people who want to get a four-year degree after having earned a two-year degree and have extensive relevant life experience on the job, whether they can get credit for that.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll just say something and then ask Jeff to weigh in. I think you're talking about things like a competency-based exam and things that can be completed for recognition of significant professional applied experience. You're going to, I believe, see more of this in the future. When you see a lot of the drawdown from the military, many of these are entering the workforce. I think that the GI Bill is now financially as larger proportionately to when it was first signed into law. So you've got a lot of military experience and credit. I mean, for example, some of these soldiers and sailors and airmen are coming into higher education with 22 years of leading men, making decisions, being strategic, and then being asked to take an introductory course. So we've got to come up with better ways to evaluate competency, but the translation of experience into academic competency/credit, it's a very delicate topic in higher education. The Bachelor's of Arts in Applied Sciences that I mentioned earlier actually inverts the traditional academic sort of degree in that they begin at a two-year school, they're given block credit for certain professional applied experiences, welders, electricians, cooks, chefs, etc., and then they take essentially that major from the junior college where it's been recognized for academic credit, and then they take it to a four-year school where instead of the major at the four-year school, they complete their core, and then they receive a degree. So we've got to think about innovative sort of configurations like that to re-invite older adult learners back into education, into retraining, training up, I like that term, training up for new industries and new workforce needs.
Good.
We do have opportunities for students in our institution for credit for prior learning and also credit for licensure or certification. So students can come in with particular licensure or certifications, and they can apply for credit on those licensure or certifications or for prior learning.
You guys have been a terrific panel. Will you join me in thanking them? We have one more panel for you, and Margaret.